Imhotep.
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 Uncle Ujas Deganet. I am Fujishi Chibuchimas Ka in Peru, Hassan Salim. I'll be your moderator tonight. We'd like to welcome everybody, so people can kindly move to their seats. We're going to get ready for the libation. It's always important for us to ask permission from the ancestors to do what we have to do. It's always important to have a beautiful African community. We need to come together as a family. When we pour libation, it sets the tone, because we ask those sacred and divine ancestors, those who are responsible for helping us on our journey, we ask them to come and be with us. So without further ado, we're going to have our libation.
Is Pastor Youngblood, Dr. Youngblood here yet?
I think Joel is in the house.
Oh, you? All right. You'll do the prayer afterwards? Okay. First, I'm going to call on God Almighty. There's a female and a male aspect in traditional African culture of the great divine. And then I would call on the ancient deities that predate our existence as Homo sapiens, as humans. They've been here since the beginning, and they will be here long after we are gone. And then from there, I would call on ancient ancestors that are in Africa. Some have existed for more than 7,000 years, up to about 100 years. And then I would call on my own ancestor, my own bloodline that was born here out of Mississippi, out of Arkansas, out of Virginia. And then after that, I ask that you call on your ancestors, your own blood ancestors, your grandma, those that knew you, right? And I know some of us, I said this last week, some of us within the church, we don't understand that even in the Bible, the libation or the pouring of drink offerings is mentioned 90 times throughout the Old and the New Testament. This is an ancient African ritual. And we'll get into this with this lecture series. Inyame, Inyamewa, Inyakumpon, Tredi and Pam Kwame inside. Asasi Ya, Mother Earth inside. And Hunan Ham, that's the stars and the moon and the universe inside. Say Hiru inside. Nana Eseketwa inside. Nana Open inside. Kwajubi, surgery. It is me, Issa. Papa and Mama Weaver inside. Uncle Jonas inside. Great Grandma Lucy inside. Dorothy May Fingers, Grandma Dorothy May Fingers inside. Paulette Fingers inside. My mother Laverne Fingers inside. My father, John Fingers inside. My grandparents, Roberta and Robert Lee inside. My stepfather, Theodore Lee inside. If I call on one spirit, I call on you all. You call on your spirits now, your own ancestors.
Lucille.
Side, drink.
Clemson.
Drink.
Vernon.
Drink.
James Cleveland.
Drink.
Uncle Calvin.
Drink.
Uncle Richard.
Drink.
Uncle Sherman.
Side. Drink. Drink. John Henry Clark. Yosef Ben Yakin. Drink. Malcolm X. Harriet Tubman. Sojourner Truth. Elijah Muhammad. Drink. Oh, great spirits, both ancient and those that are new. We call on you. If we call on one, we call on you all. We ask that you continue to bless us and protect us. We ask that you give us this knowledge. We pray, oh great spirits, for this great church, Mount Episcopal Baptist Church, and this leadership in the Reverend Dr. Johnny Youngblood, and the entire congregation and his administration and staff, and his pastors and assistant pastors. We pray for all of those that are on their way, that they come safely. We ask this end, that those who leave this place, that they go home without any problems. We ask those spirits, you know our needs already. So we constantly beg you to help us, to let righteousness shine out of us. We have come from a great tradition of righteousness, and morals, ma'at. That is our tradition. That is what Dr. King and Malcolm and Harriet and Sojourner Truth and Fannie Lou Hamer all come out of. We ask that you bring new generations of righteous people to our ranks. We ask these things in your name. I'm in your...
Let's pray. Gracious God, you are the giver of every good and perfect thing, and we say thank you. We thank you for this day that you blessed us with a beautiful day, but above all, we thank you for this night. We thank you for ancestors to be able to pray towards who will help to pave the way for our lives. Now this night, I pray that you will open up our ears, but above all, open up our minds and our hearts to hear the history of all of us. Thank you for these presenters and all who participate in this night. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Again, everybody, can we have an ashe?
Ashe.
Dua.
Dua.
Give praises and thanks. This series is taking on a dynamic twist, a dynamic turn that continues some of the flavor that was given on by First World. Some of y'all remember the excitement of First World. Every week, dynamic speakers from all around the country coming in and enlightening us and taking us to another level. But we're back on that track. And so now we're bringing you some of the most dynamic speakers from around the country who are going to uplift us, educate our minds, inspire us. Some people say, well, information, what's all this inspiration about? We don't need to be inspired. I say, yes, you do. You need to be inspired every day. It's just like bathing. You bathe every day, don't you? One wash don't do it. You need to bathe every day. You need inspiration every day. And so, without further ado, we're going to get ready to talk. Today's lecture is on the fall of Egypt as a catalyst for the transatlantic slave trade. And Brother Asar Hotep, this is his book, so hopefully y'all will be able to get his book if you haven't already got it. Let me give you just a small brief bio of Brother Asar Hotep. He is a computer programmer, of African researcher from Houston, Texas. His research focuses on culture, linguistic, and philosophical links between ancient Egyptian civilization and modern Bantu culture in Central and Southern Africa. He is the founder of the Indala Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. He is also the author of Bacala of North America and The Living Sons of Vitality. The search for a meaningful name for African Americans and Passions, the Christ or Passion of Osiris, the Congo origins of the Jesus myth. Asar is a noted speaker and philosopher and is currently organizing efforts in a nationwide venture titled the African American Culture Development Project, a national project aimed at creating a framework for an African American culture which will help vitalize, stimulate the economic, political, scientific, and cultural sphere of African Americans, their life here in the United States. So brothers and sisters, let's give him a warm round of applause for Brother Asar.
Peace and blessings. Can y'all hear me? Everyone can hear me today. I'd like to thank y'all for coming out to God's sacred space. No longer in Houston, I'm in Philadelphia right now. But again, I'd like to thank y'all for coming to listen to what I and Dr. Issa have to say. But before, testing, 1, 2. So before we talk louder. Okay. Before we get started, I would like to ask the elders for permission to speak.
Speak.
I appreciate it, thank you. As noted in the introduction, I am a software computer programmer, but I also am a linguist, and I study African languages to study history in a way, to see what remnants, what residue of African thought remains in the language. And so this lecture won't be a linguistic lecture. I'm assuming that y'all are not linguists, so I'm going to bore y'all with a linguistic diatribe. But in my studies of language, I've come across many different notes in terms of our history. And I come to discover that our direct relation to ancient Egypt has to deal with its fall. And so that's why I titled this The Fall of Ancient Egypt as a Catalyst for the Transatlantic Slave Trade. So I'm going to try to, this is normally a 2-hour lecture, so I'm going to try to do it in 30 minutes, which means I'm going to leave a lot of details out. So if it seems choppy in terms of continuity of information, that's why. But I will continue. Let's see. Usually when I start, I like to give honor to the elders whose shoulders that I stand on. As you can see in the center, we have John G. Jackson, John Henry Clark, Ida Van Sertima, Joseph Jokanam, and Lefe Asante, that we was, Dr. Rita Jeffries, Walt, and Dr. Wade Nobles, and a whole host of others. I hope that I'm continuing in that tradition. Expanding our knowledge of our history as it relates to our present. I like to know that I am an African-centered scholar. So when I do my work, it is from the perspective of the Africans themselves. And so this map, allegedly upside down, is how our ancestors saw the world and they oriented themselves. So in the direction of the now going into Central Africa. So I call this a re-Afrientation, that's that I do in terms of reorganizing or recentering our African minds. For those that don't know, this is Africa, map of Africa. Soon beyond that. One of the things I want to discuss is first, continuities in terms of culture, in terms of kingship, in terms of psychology, in terms of ritual, in terms of the formation of families and governments. That when you study African cultures, you'll find that there's this underlying thread that unites them all. And there's a reason for this. One, because Africans have been on the continent since forever. And throughout this time span, in terms of, if we go by the biological time frame of Homo sapiens of like 190 to 170,000 years, we have been migrating, moving in and out all across Africa, intermarrying within cultures, sharing vocabulary, and things of this nature, to where the cultures, in many respects, have kind of converged on one another. In linguistics, we call this convergence, and then there's periods of divergence, into where communities split, their languages differentiate a little bit, but then they come together again. And so we'll introduce a term called punctuated equilibrium just a little later that's going to be relevant to what we're saying here. And these are just, vocabulary words, like what we see here in ancient Egypt. Most people pronounce it like ak, but this is really an RK type sound. It's like reku. In the Yoruba language, we say iluku or ileku, or iluku, it's the word for spirit. You can say aiku. This is like an immortal being. This is the same word in the ancient Egyptian language. I'm just trying to show the continuity of thought here. One of the major deities is, we pronounce it Ptah, but the same word exists in the Yoruba language as Pataki. It means a chief or the principal, the head, chiefly, as someone who's at the head at the beginning. And in the Calajan language, the Calajan are East African people who used to live in ancient Egypt, specifically in an area called To. We say Jedu, which is like the worship center for the deity Osiris. They migrated down into the Sudan, into Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda today. And they still hold in their memory many aspects of the culture and their origins, in ancient Egypt. So they're good people to study if you want to learn how to pronunciate some of the ancient Egyptian words, but even to look at some of the culture and what is retained among modern African people. They would be good people to look at. But so this word in the Calajan is Pitayat or Kitayat, with the same or similar meaning, the leader, the overlord, he who is in the front. Now I feel like I'm talking too loud. This is the deity Ma'at. I won't go through the linguistics of this, but it's not really pronounced Ma'at. It's really pronounced something like Marakit. And in the Congo, they say Numbu. In the Bassa language, which is a Bantu language out of Cameroon, this is Malega. And I'm choosing these groups specifically, with the exception of the Calajan, because African Americans come from these groups, the Yoruba groups, the Bassa groups, the key Congo speakers in the Congo. I want you to understand that the psychology, these words, these customs exist in these West Central African countries that you find in ancient Egypt. It's all one big family. Same word for solar boat in the Congo, again among the Kiambundi. They say Manungu for boat. I won't go into details. We also say unk. You'll see everybody rocking unks. The word unk isn't really pronounced unk. They get that from Coptic. But the initial sound is a K. And so we say onko, which is a greeting scholar. Most people think that the unk has to deal with the moon and the ballots coming together and all of that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just your collarbone and your sternum. And it has to do with breathing. You can see, well, you can't really see over here on your body, but you can see the ancient Egyptians superimposed the unk with the Djed pillar here, which is the spine cord of Osiris. But this is where your spinal cord is. They were scientists, and so a lot of people like to put a lot of spookism and religion on it, but they were just scientists, and they would make these creations to remind the doctors and whatnot of, what certain body parts were, what their functions, and things of this nature. So they didn't have big textbooks like we have today with diagrams, so they just made it a part of the culture itself. And so this is why you see the in the actual depictions put up against people's noses, because it has to do with breathing. It protects your diaphragm here and with your breath. That's a different. And so we mentioned punctuated equilibrium earlier. I won't read all of this, but it has to deal with Darwin. They get it from biology, dealing with Darwin's theory in terms of the rate of change in evolution. We kind of borrowed this in linguistics to talk about the rate in which languages change as a result of punctuated events. So I would consider slavery a punctuated event, where a population was living relatively peacefully for a long period of time, but then something happened to cause dispersions, migrations, and things of this nature all of a sudden. And so now people are forced to migrate and from their language centers, and so now they're having to learn other languages and we share and things of this nature. And this is pretty much how language changes kind of rapidly around the world. And so we deal with this in terms of contact linguistics, language change, and things of that nature. Again, I'm not trying to make this a linguistic lecture, so I won't bore you to death with all the details, but I just want to throw that out there as something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we're talking about the transatlantic slave holocaust. And so I want to start off with the formation of ancient Egypt. It's going to be really critical to this lecture, because the formation of Egypt was a result, again, of this punctuated equilibrium event. This time, the punctuated equilibrium event was the Sahara Desert. And so what we know as the Sahara was not the Sahara as we know it all the time. The monsoon rains used to go all the way up to North Africa, and so it was well watered. It had lakes, rivers, and things. And so populations used to move there and live there because they were following the herds and things of that nature. But as the monsoon rains began to recede, the desert started to form and it started to push the populations out in all different directions. And so it's because of this punctuated event in terms of the desertification of North Africa that pushed a lot of groups into the Nile Valley. And so a few weeks ago, y'all had Dr. Sharmarka Kita, here to discuss biological origins of humans and things of that nature. And so he's the one who wrote this particular blurb, but just basically explained what I explained, so I'm not going to read for you. But in that process, when they were living in the Sahara, this was one of those equilibrium periods. And so when you're in equilibrium periods, you're doing a lot of trading, a lot of exchanges, and cultures begin to converge on one another. And so when the punctuated event happened, it spread the populations in all different directions, some going into what is now Nigeria, some going into Chad, some going into the Nile Valley. They are bringing with them their culture and customs, which kind of mirror each other. And so Martin Bernal, in his Black Athena, the Afro-Asiatic Roots of Classical Civilization, Volume 3, is just talking about this material culture prior to the development of ancient Egyptian civilization. And so he says, a common material culture is known as the Khartoum Mesolithic or early Khartoum from its type site, excavated in the 1940s. Evidence of this culture dating from the 10th to the 7th millennium before present has been found in more than 40 sites over a huge range stretching from central Kenya to eastern Sudan and as far west as Algeria and Senegal. And so what they're saying is that you're finding this common culture and these common materials from Sudan to Kenya, all the way to West Africa and Algeria, Northwest Africa and Algeria. And so this cultural unity existed already prior to the development of ancient Egypt. And it's going to play out very uniquely. I won't read all of this, but this is an excerpt from an archaeologist out of Africa by the name of Felix H. Hyman, who wrote a text called The Unity of African History, 3000 BC to AD 500. And what I want to read is just what I have in bold. He's talking about these, what they call industries in archaeology. And so the spread of the Kensignore or Inderet or Narosura industries can now be seen to belong to an epoch in the African past associated with a wider political, economic, and cultural networks. What he's talking about before here is, again, just like what we saw in the previous slide, that there's a sharing of political concepts, there's already networks going on. In other words, they're doing business, they're doing trade before the development of ancient Egypt. This is from Toby Wilkinson, 1999, from Early Dynastic Egypt. I'll just read the bolded. Dynasty 0 to late Second Dynasty. The graves, talking about the pre-dynastic and the first dynastic peoples, yielded abundant qualities of stone vessels and pottery, including imported Syro-Palestinian jugs, providing concrete evidence for trade between Egypt and the Near East during the First Dynasty. So not only are Africans doing trade inter-Africa, they're also doing trade all the way in Palestine, in the Levant. So there's already a wide range of movement and trade going on before ancient Egypt really gets started. And so he goes on to suggest that the desire to gain access to the trade routes with Palestine and Nubia may have been a key factor in the process of state formation. Skipping down, economic interests provided grounds for political expansionism. What is suggesting here is that one of the reasons why the uniting of Egypt came together in the first place is so they could control the trade. And so we're talking about empires here, discussing empires from Egypt to Songhai. All empires start as a result of trying to control trade. And so Egypt forms as a result of trying to control the roads of trade from Palestine into Central Africa. Basically said that already. I'm waiting for this individual to actually release his study. His name is Eric Kubezi. He's an anthropobiologist, I should say, in Toulouse, France. He did some studies and found, examining the dental records of pre-dynastic Egyptians, and come to find out that they were modern Khoisan people. If you know about the Khoisan, for the most part, they're kind of, at least in modern days, relegated to southwest Central Africa. The gods must be crazy too if you've seen that film, those people. So they were more widespread across Africa. And when you're talking about some of these pre-dynastic Egyptians, this is who you're looking at. And I put these stone vessels here, statues here next to him. This is Menes, allegedly the first king, one of the first kings of ancient Egypt. And he kind of resembles, to me, at least, Narmer. And so, Narmer, they say Narmer is probably separate, or Menes, they may be one and the same. It's still a debate going on. But they look like Khoisan individuals. This is a scholar out of Canada who's originally from Eritrea. I took this photo at a DIA conference in Philadelphia some years ago. It kind of reminded me of Amenhotep III. We're going to see, these kinds of physical connections. People always look at the Netis head crowns or whatnot that you find in ancient Egypt. They're really just head cloths that, what do you call them, pastoralists wear, so to speak. And so a lot of stuff that you think are really elaborate in Egypt are really just simple. It's like we would wear a do-rag today. That's basically all it is. This is a so-called Table of Nations. This is one variation of what the ancient Egyptians looked like according to them. I took this picture in the tomb of Ramesses the Sixth in Egypt. These are some of the Libyan Tehinu, which we know as the Fulani. Fulani and the Mudabi women, they live in Libya. And so sometimes you'll see, for example, a lot of these images that are kind of whitewashed in the reproductions, but they really kind of reflect like you see this Fulani person here kind of with this white paint on his face with the kind of yellow markings. It's not necessarily white people. That's just the makeup that they were wearing. Sometimes you'll see them in the dark red as well in terms of the Fulani. Some people from Lake Chad. These are kind of chronology dates that are kind of important in terms of, when we're looking at pre-dynastic Egypt from 3800 BCE on to the Christian era, 550 to 1400 BCE. Later on with the Islamic invasions and things of that nature, but I won't go through all that detail here. Here's a map of all of the African kingdoms that we know to date. I wish it was closer so you can kind of see the writings, but let's see. I don't know if you can see this, but the ancient Egyptian empire was about, to this limit here. What you see in this yellow is kind of more of the modern Arabic Muslim empire in North Africa. Ethiopia, Kush, Kanim, Bornu, Songhai, the original Ghana. So some people don't know that modern Ghana is not ancient Ghana. So ancient Ghana was further west towards Senegal, Mali, the Wolof, the Ashanti Empire, the Yoruba Oyo tradition. They should have Benin up here as well. But then in Central Africa, you had the Luba, Lunda, Monomotapa, the Zulu kingdoms, Kilwa, the Buganda empires. It's been a lot of empires, but every single one of these locations were centers of trade at one point or another that rose and fell as a result of having access to trading ports. What I want to kind of introduce here in this discussion is what changed and what made all of this possible in the first place. And with Christopher Eric, who is a historian out of UC Berkeley and linguist, in his text, The Civilizations of Africa, A History to 1800-2002, he notes about this commercial revolution. Now, at the time of ancient Egypt, and for the most part, still kind of going on later on after Egypt, but in Africa generally, trade was done at the behest of the king. He would organize expeditions to go on these long distance trades, get a whole bunch of goods, bring them back. He would take what he needs for himself, give whatever's next on the level to people in his courts, and then kind of spread it out, from there. But then a commercial revolution happened to where it started with the Phoenicians, where the Phoenicians started making trade posts. They started having colonies, not in the sense of colonizing, individual groups. They were just set up to where they can trade their goods there in different places along the sea borders. And so what happens here is, as a result of this different type of commercialism, there starts to arise a merchant class, to where now they're not going directly to the king, for goods. They're going directly to the people themselves. And people would hire merchants who were familiar with sea trading to go these long distances to get these items. And so this is what he discusses in this particular text here. And I'll actually read this one. He says, when the effects of the commercial transformation reached a region, kings and emperors soon lost their ability to treat trade as a royally capitalized and instigated activity, intended to preserve the commodities of trade as the prerequisites of immemorial power and position. Instead, their policies shifted toward controlling access to the products of commerce and to ensuring security and other conditions that attracted and enhanced the movement of goods. No longer could kings rely on agriculturally sustained and religiously based claims to an ability to protect their lands and people. Now they also had to overtly support the material prosperity of their people vis-a-vis other societies. And so instead of everything coming through the king, he allowed other nations on the outskirts of town to set up shop for when they come in and bring their wares in, and he would just tax it. And so it's kind of like our system today. This is what ushers in modern capitalism in the way that we know it today. So it's just like, it's just how it is today. People bring their goods from their countries here, we tax them, the revenues go to run the state, and everything doesn't go directly through Barack Obama or whoever's in the presidency, and he doesn't trickle the stuff down in his cabinet and things of that nature. It all starts with the Phoenicians, then the Greeks, with the city-states, and then people in the Levant and other areas follow shop, and it kind of evolves from there. I usually have this one earlier, but I just wanted to show that this is a text, Punt and Aksum, Egypt and the Horn of Africa. In this particular text, I'll just read it and explain a little bit. If this was the case, speaking of something earlier, we can entertain the possibility that at least some of their goods may have come from, even we're talking about Egypt here, further afield within Africa from the area of modern Somalia or further inland and more tropical areas, as well as further south along the East African coast. from the southern Arabian Peninsula across the Red Sea, or possibly even from India. This is going to be very critical. The same text. Evidence for the existence of such a far-flung contact even a millennium earlier than the 18th dynasty, either direct or indirect, but more than likely the latter, has recently been recognized. A pendant recovered in a grave dated 2500 to 2400 BC at Tel Asmar near modern-day Baghdad, which is Iraq, is now identified as copal from the area of Zanzibar, Madagascar, and Mozambique. So you're seeing how far the trade is. If y'all familiar with the African map, all the way down to Mozambique. The material from Mozambique is going all the way into Iraq and Baghdad. And so, you know, and this is important for when, you know, people try to deny the relationship between ancient Egypt and the rest of Africa. And so they're finding these materials all over the place in these connections. There's more, because I don't have time, you know, to go into it, I won't. It's important because some of the material in places like Mozambique and Madagascar made its way into the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And so this is just one hieroglyph, which is the Gardner sign we kind of categorized by, you know, Alan Gardner. This is the S35 sign, which they call a standard, that you see a lot of the bearers marching with, that you can kind of see here, and then from the Narmer Mace head right here, this glyph here. But this is actually, they also use this as a fan, but this is actually a plant, which is the Madagascariensis, which is native to Madagascar. Again, remember we read earlier that from Madagascar, Mozambique, and places we're finding material making its way all the way into Baghdad. So the ancient Egyptians, again, were coming as far down south into Madagascar, Mozambique. Mozambique, in terms of the Atlantic slave trade, is very important. When I did my DNA test on my mother's side, that's where we come from. And so everywhere you go, in terms of where African Americans are from, are these ports where ancient Egyptians used to do trade and things of this nature. You can kind of see, I'll skip that. This is kind of the trade routes going into West Africa. And the trade routes again from Egypt going into Lake Chad, and, you know, going back up here into Africa. It's all in the Sahel Belt. They're going back and forth, making trade. And so what happened is the ancient Egypt had a monopoly on the trade. But when the civilization began to crumble, other nations up north and then the Levant was finding out now where they were getting their goods. So instead of going to the middleman, they started going into Africa directly. So this is when you start to see the Greeks go into Ethiopia and the Sudan. Later on with the Muslims settling now on the East Coast, and you start to develop the Swahili states and things of this nature. There was an earlier scramble for Africa in terms of the raw goods. Don't have much time. This is a linguist, Jean-Claude Mboli, who advanced Dr. Theophilus Obina's work, especially with the language family called the Negro Egyptian. And this is his map. He's showing the migrations of the Negro Egyptian speakers, that kind of unity that we saw earlier. I won't go through that, but this is unique. One argument from this is a text called a Restatement of the Bantu Origins. Bantu speakers are who dominate in Central and South Africa. There's many theories of where they came from, and one theory is that they came from the Sahara and Egypt. And so this is one text that has drawn this map and has made this argument. There's another argument in French, the ethno-cultural relationship between ancient Egyptian and modern Bantus. This is written in French, S.O. Ngome. I won't go through that. The late Dr. Foucault in one of his texts. I won't read all of this, but we have oral tradition that was recorded in 1914 that said that basically we come from a place called Kayinga. This is in Central Africa. These were the Congo Kingdom folks. They say that they came from what is now called the Sahara, and that's what they call the Sahara then, Kayinga. And we actually have this word in the ancient Egyptian lexicon. I'm trying to get through this. The eloquence of the scribes, Ayekwaye Amam, he's talking about the oral traditions. When he was, researching for his books, he kept coming across these oral traditions saying that we come from places like Egypt and Sudan. And so this was what helped him to organize his stories. So, you start to see these commonalities. This is Osiris, this is the Yoruba king with the crown, the crook, the same kind of emblems. The Saqqara temple, this is the Nsudi village amongst the Igbo people in West Africa. They're all, graves and things of this nature. This is a Gao mosque, and of course, pyramid in ancient Egypt. Recent DNA analysis on Ramesses III and the 20th dynasty showing affinities with people in South Africa and Southeast. You notice this is where Mozambique and places where the Zulu and all of these other folks are. DNA is showing these relationships with these people as far as South Africa is concerned. I'll skip that. This one's here showing that, some of the ancient Egyptian expeditions was to get gold from Zimbabwe. And so, that's where the Monomotapa kingdom was. And so all of these other kingdoms start to arise when Egypt falls. So none of these places exist until Egypt falls, because now they're taking control of the trade in their areas. So these empires arise. So, just quickly, I'm just going to kind of summarize here. What ended up happening is the Muslims took over in terms of North Africa. They took over this place called Spain. And around 1491, 1492 was when they were kicked out of Spain. However, they still had a stronghold in Arabia and places like this. Everybody's trying to get into that trade with India, because the east coast of Africa was having trades with India and China. But the Europeans could not go through the areas in which the Muslims controlled. So this is when they tried to go around Africa to go to India. But, we know what happens with Christopher Columbus in 1492. He gets lost and ends up in basically the Caribbean. All of these things are linked. It's dealing with the commerce. We don't have time, but I just wanted to say that one of the downfalls of, even with all of these kingdoms, is that none of these kingdoms produced anything. They supplied all of the raw material, but they never produced anything. And so as a result, they didn't have even trade. And so when the trade shifted, it left them crippled, so to speak. It's just like how modern Africa is today, to where everyone is taking out all of the raw materials, but they're not producing for themselves. And as a result, they're not building, they're not sustaining these empires. And so, we could deal with Mansa Musa in Mali, who took basically all that gold and brought it over there to Mecca, but didn't use that gold to build up the Malian empire, which would have built up enough resistance, to fight off the Arab slave trade. But we were satisfied with just giving the raw materials while the rest of the world was in production. And they're continually to try to keep that scenario, because that's how they get richer. And because you sell your commodities really cheap. And that's my time. And so, just more I want to get into. Again, it's a 2-hour lecture that I'm trying to condense, but I just wanted to at least throw that out there, showing, the trade with India and China on the east coast of Africa. And then, of course, there was another commodity, which was called the African. There was another commodity of cheap labor, which is called the African. And so, this is where they start, because again, all of these other civilizations are building, and now they need cheap labor to expand their empires. And so we are ready because all empires are imperialistic by nature. And so we like to big up empires, but they got there because they ran over some other people. And when you do that, you create enemies. And so there's just people just waiting in the cut to get rid of you for some issues that you have done to their ancestors in the past. So there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of mistrust going on in Africa this time. And so there's a lot of infighting, which, you know, they didn't have, with the exception of the Ashanti Akan Empire and the Benin Empire, no one had a slave economy. And so they didn't need slaves to, you know, maintain their civilizations. So they just sold them or gave them away to Europeans and Arabs. And so all of this as a result of this commercial revolution. And, you know, I want to just throw some things out there for us to kind of think about, you know, in the process. I wish I could have gone longer, but, you know, I still had to take out a whole bunch of things that were connected things more. I was only at 30 or 35 minutes. So I just want to say thank you. And
Give him a big round of applause. We'll be able to address some of the issues that he wasn't able to go through in the question and answer period. But now we're going to bring on Brother Jahid Assad, Dr. Issa, to continue. One of his books is The Origin of the Word Aman. And so we'll be able to contact him about getting that information. Issa is a native of St. Louis County in Missouri. He received his PhD from Howard University. He was also a student of the Masters of Divinity program at Campbell School of Theology in Emory University. He worked as an activist for the National Archives and Record Administration. He also worked for the National Park Service in Washington, D.C. He has held tenured track positions at Elizabeth City State University and Delaware State University. He is a former scholar and resident of the W.E.B. Du Bois Center in Accra, Ghana, and he is the editor with the Journal of Pan-African Studies. Dr. Issa is the co-author of The Origin of the Word Aman, and that is this book here. And his upcoming book is the study of Marcus Garvey movement in Louisiana. I think he was taking pre-orders on that. So, brothers and sisters, we want to continue this. We had a dynamic start, and Dr. Issa is going to take the anchor to give him one.
All right, how's everybody doing today? All right, very good. So, this book here, The Origin of the Word Amen, which it was supposed to come today, but it won't be here until next week, so you can pre-order it. We only have a limited amount of books, so we'll talk about that at the end. But this particular book, I started on this book more than 15 years ago. Through my many trips back and forth to West Africa and North Africa, Egypt, and through my training in seminary, I always thought that the Amen outside of Kemet made its way into West Africa via Christianity. But one day I was in a particular community where Isaac Hayes was being inducted as a king in the Ewe region of Ghana. They call it the Volta region. And there were a delegation of other kings there, along with the president of Ghana then, who was Jerry Rawlings. And one king, his name was Amen the Fourth, right? And I was like, what is that? You know? And I went and asked him, I said, did I hear that right? And it was he gave me a sheet of paper, his name was there, Amen the Fourth, which means that there were 3 other Amen kings in that region that had predated this king. And so that began my quest. and understanding. Later on, about 2 years later, while I was working as a scholar in residence at the Du Bois Center in Accra, Ghana, a lot of us don't know that W.E.B. Du Bois died in Ghana. He didn't die here. He left the United States and helped Kwame Nkrumah and did a lot of great things. And he's a national hero in Ghana. And there's a research center named after him there, and he and his wife are buried there. I met a scholar by the name of O. Kwame Osei. He's actually a linguist. And he was giving a lecture at the Du Bois Center while I was the scholar in residence there. And at the lecture, he was selling these little bitty pamphlets. They were 10 pages each, called the Origin of the Word Amen. It was just a little bitty pamphlet, 10 pages. And in that book, this pamphlet, he was making the argument that the Akans and other Central and West African groups migrated from ancient Egypt, right? Now, I'd never heard this argument before. I was still working on my PhD, and I really didn't have the linguistical background to even challenge them or even try to understand them. I'm a historian by training. So I decided to bring this pamphlet back to the U.S. to one of my friends, Dr. Faragee, who will come on for about 15 minutes again from Ghana next week. Next week he'll come on for the first 15 minutes. And he has some training in linguistics. And so we started talking about the historical notion of the word Amen. And it was through Celine that he reminded me of what Sheikh Diop said about the word Amen, in which we will get into. So this is why we have Africa's impact on religious heritage of the world. The origin of the word Amen, ancient knowledge the Bible is never told. So we are myself and Dr. Faragee, we are the editors of a small 10-page pamphlet by O. Kwame Osei, and we made it into a 100-page book with our research. So, O. Kwame Osei says that the Amen is an Akan word. He makes the argument that it is exclusively owned by the Akans, the Akan people who exist in West Africa. He argues in his book, in his pamphlet, Amen is neither a Hebrew nor a Latin word. Amen is a tree word and is rampant throughout Akan culture. He also states that the Akan migrated or originated from ancient Kemet. The Akan originally owned the word Amen as their god. The Akan represented a culture that participated in giving birth and art and civilization of Africa and world civilization. And we see the Amen spelled in various ways. The most classical form is A-M-O-N or A-M-A-N, but we see it traditionally in this English phrase as A-M-E-N, and we know the Muslims use Amin. Who are the Akan? They are the largest ethnic group in Ghana and in parts of the Ivory Coast. They are a Niger-Congo linguistic group, meaning their language originates from the Niger-Congo region. Some of the major ethnic groups are the Akans, the Fanti, and the Akua-Pim, but there are others. During the height of the Ashanti Empire, they controlled the trans-Saharan trade from the forest belt to the Sahel. The Sahel is the region that we call the Sahara. All right, so we see here, these are some old pictures of a map of some major important kingdoms. And that red line, according to Osei, you see that red line? Those red lines up there, going from ancient classical ancient Egypt to Kush to West Africa, according to Osei. That's the migration pattern that took place. And that's how the Akans got to West Africa, according to Osei. Amen in classical African civilizations. Now, according to Dion, Amen is the God of all of Black Africa. This is in African origins of civilization, myth, or reality. He said you can find this throughout Black Africa, no matter whether you're going to Chad, Libya, down to South Africa, and in East Africa. He said you will find the word Amen there. And many times it takes on the same meaning. Now, in 1958, a European Jewish lady was studying in Ghana. She wrote several books comparing the Akan people to ancient Egypt. I first saw this book at the Du Bois Library in Ghana. He had his own private collection, and I went through a lot of his old books. And I saw this book, and in her book she said the Akan culture is important for our understanding of ancient Egypt and Near East ritual and beliefs. Amen, the supreme divinity of ancient Nubia and Kemet. I know that's kind of small, but the founding kings of ancient Egypt and Nubia held the title Amen Baru, which the world knows as Norman or Mims and Mims. All right, according to Herodotus and Manetho in the pre-dynastic period. This means before the start of the first dynastic period. They're down south in the area called Tasseti and other regions. Right, so I mean in the linguistical form equals Amen, the hidden one. The earliest documented textual evidence of Amen occurs in an utterance of 301 in the Egyptian pyramid text in the Middle Kingdom. That's around 2000 BCE. This is the earliest form that we have in written text form. Amen-Ra venerated at Thebes at the temple of Luxor and Karnak in Kemet. Amen is venerated in Nubia, in the temples of Gebel and Barkal. Now, right here, this is an incense burner that was found at a site in Tasseti. This is pre-dynastic Egypt, before the first Egyptian dynasty. Now, the thing is kind of far, but in the middle, we have the king right in the middle, and we have a hawk sitting on top of a temple. All right, this is a Sharish facade in Tasseti. Now, this is the earliest image of a pharaoh sitting with Haru on a temple, and I'm going to get to that in a second. We're using archaeology. Now, of course, historically, most people say that this is normal, but what we found out in our book, The Origin of the Word Amen, by looking at the Sharif facade, that his real title is Amen Haru. And we're the first to point this out. And we even began to make the argument in our book, The Origin of the Word Amen. And this book was endorsed by Dr. Asante and Kane Hofelder. They endorsed the book. And so what we began to look at and try to argue that many of the early pre-dynastic kings and many of the kings in the Old and Middle Kingdom and in the New Kingdom, that we have to, by looking at the language, by understanding the linguistical aspect, that we may have to go back and rename them properly, right? So if we know that Norma or Mills is not the correct title for the first Kemetic king, so we can only assume that many of the other kings were also misnamed. Now, are many queens and kings of Nubia? Now, many of us know about Queen Amani-Ture. My baby daughter is named after her. 1st century, that's the last one at the bottom. Queen Ameneras in Rome, she's mentioned in the New Testament. And we have some of the queens that are named after the Amen in the 25th dynastic period also. Here's Amani-Ture, or Queen Candace. She's mentioned in Acts, in the book of Acts, 8:26 through 40. These are African, black people, jet black people, some of them, most of them. So, the Amen in Ghana among the Akans. We decided, once I brought this pamphlet back to Brother Salim, I said, man, you have to come to Ghana with me. And this was his first trip to Ghana. I said, we have to go and see where we can see this Amen at throughout Ghana. We spent about a month there just traveling, looking for the Amen, talking to people, right? Just talking to regular people. So it was kind of funny because when we got out the airport and we got a taxi, the guy who drove the taxi, his name was Amen. Amen. So, I mean, this is how rampant the Amen is in African traditional culture. And we're going from ancient Kemet to living modern day Africa. And this also supports what Brother Asar was saying, that we are looking at African cultures that are alive. We don't just have to, the new research on ancient Kemet is going into Africa. And not only going into Africa, but studying us Africans here in the United States, because we are the same people as we will go and we will see. But here are some of the towns that we personally visited. There's one town called Amanfu, that's located in the western region along the coast. Wasa Amanfi, that's a district. Amenna, and on and on and on and on. There is a song that is sung among one group of Akans to this day in their harvest festival. And it's we feri among we. We are the people of Amen Ra. This is today. Today, not 15,000 years ago. This is today. This is what we witness ourselves as ethnographers and historians and theologians. Now, as I was translating some of the text, my then ex-wife was from Ghana. She was helping me because of her understanding of the language. And she said, you know, my sister's name is Amen. I'm like, my sister-in-law? Your sister? She said, yeah. I said, no, I thought her name was Kukun. She said, no, that's her nickname. But her given name is Amen. And now, they live way up in northern Ghana on the border of Ghana and Burkina Faso. So they're not even Akans. This is a whole other ethnic group. Now, Dr. Issa Hiller's royal title, right? Nana Bethra Amen Kwatia II. Right? This is his royal title. This is a traditional African royal title given to one of our most esteemed scholars. He's now an ancestor. God bless his soul. There are men in Ghana. Again, continue. There are more towns. We found it everywhere. Right? Everywhere. Throughout Ghana. But right now we're focusing on the Akans. One town, the last one to the bottom, literally translated as the land of the are now in our edited version. We're doing a new version of it that will be out sometime next year. This book came out in 2005, and we wrote this book for the average person in the church. And we presented this throughout churches throughout the South and the West. Also, the word Jiyamen. We believe that this is another form of Amen. Now, classical diffusion. Diffusion means that one group of people take from another culture. It's not that it's bad, right? We know that hip-hop in its modern form started right here in New York. But you can go to Russia and you'll see Europeans doing hip-hop. You can go to China, right? So diffusion is ancient. A lot of people say, well, they stole that. Well, no, human beings have always been borrowing cultural attributes for thousands and thousands of years. So what we are arguing, what we argue to other scholars, like Osei, who I studied under, is, well, you're right, Kwame Osei, and you're also wrong. All right? And this is what we're pointing out now. The ancient Egyptians, what we're saying is, as far as a classical diffusionist point of view, the ancient Egypt is a non-African civilization. This is what European scholars mostly say, right? Ancient Egypt is Near Eastern and developed, independent, and in isolation of quote-unquote Black Africa. Many Black African cultures carry the marks of ancient Egyptian civilization. Now, this is what Kwame Osei is saying, that many Black African cultures carry the marks of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt is the unilateral disseminator of culture into Black Africa, right? And this is what a lot of scholars said in the past. Now, we say in our book, In the Origin of the Word, Amen, we say, well, let's reconsider some of this diffusionism theories based on the latest research. We argue that ancient Egypt is not the sole and exclusive disseminator of culture throughout ancient Africa. Now, I know that's going to upset some people, but this is what scholarship should do. We have to discuss these things in theory. Egypt and Nubia emerged from a classical Sudanese substratum, or the Sahel, and I'll get into that in a second. Ancient Nubia is the font of classical Sudanese culture and tradition. We're talking about ancient Egypt, that is ancient Nubia that predates Kemet by thousands of years. So we're saying that this culture that we call ancient Kemet pre-existed thousands of years in the Sahel. And once the Sahel, this is why you heard Dr. Kita, Dr. Cornadu, Brother Johnson of Saw and Hotel, we always talk about the Sahara. That's very important in understanding because it is the Sahara or the Sahel that is now a desert wasteland. But Libya found out via satellite that there were rivers, underground rivers. And they even built an aqueduct system that France destroyed when they went and invaded, along with the United States, they went and invaded Libya. But as Brother Johnson was saying, before it was a desert, it was a vast green forest belt, right? And many of those ancient rivers are still there under the desert. Now, we also say that the dialectical interactions between Nile Valley, Niger, and the Congo River valleys. We're arguing before ancient Egypt, there was cultural diffusion But the basis of ancient Kemetic culture is coming from the Sahel. And once the Sahel dries up, we have those groups of people. Some move up north toward what is now known as ancient Egypt, and some move to what is now known as Tasset. Some move south to the group that the brother talked about in South Africa, and many move west. Right? So we're making the argument that from the Sahel, where you see that orange in that area, some parts of that area, all the way to Kush, some groups move to what is now known as Nubia and Kemet and Kush. Some move south, others move west. And that ancient Kemet is not necessarily the sole disseminator to all African cultures. Right? That these people took this culture. That's why this is all new research. And me and Brother Issa, we talk about this a lot. We discuss these theories a lot. Now, the Nubia corridor in understanding Africa, from south to north, these were Nubia in Egypt. From north to south, Nubia, Zimbabwe. From east to west, Nubia, Ghana, Ife. From east to southwest, Nubia, Chad, Congo. From west to east, Nubia and Ethiopia. Shaka to get out. Early Nile Valley dynastic civilizations began in ancient Nubia. Nomer and Mims are actually Amen-Heru and Amen, the Amen kings of early Egypt. The Amen kings of the 12th, 18th, and 25th dynastic inhabited Meroitic Kush. I'm rushing through because of time. Amen in the Old Testament. For some of our Christians out here. Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 describes Cush in Ethiopia as it encumbers the entire area of the Garden of Egypt. How many people knew this? How many church-going people knew this? Read the King James Version. Don't read many of these new translations, because these new translations are trying to translate you out of your ancient African past. Right? So you got to be careful even on the translations that you're reading. And they do this quite cleverly and intentionally. Right? Because when we scholars here in the West started doing this research, we're like, wow, the Bible says that it's that the Garden of Eden is right there in the same area where we find some of the oldest human remains. Right? So look at Genesis chapter 2:10. There's actually Genesis chapter 2 through 10 through 13. Now they use some words that may confuse you, but there is a African versions of the Bible that was edited by King Hofelder, one of the leading elder biblical scholars in the country. Now Joseph was married to a priestess of Ra. And his father-in-law was a priest of Ra. Genesis 46-20. Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and Jeremiah all sojourned to Egypt as a place of refuge. This is in the Bible. Abraham was married to an African woman, and Moses was too. Was married to a Cushite woman from the south. How did that happen? Right? These are just questions, right? So even when we look at during the 25th dynastic period, we see the Amen is there and other African deities that we like to venerate. Here are some of the Cushite kings we know that are mentioned in the Bible. These are black kings, like many, if not most of all of the ruling elite of pre-dynastic and the last of the great kingdoms in Kemet. The book of Jeremiah talks about Judah resides in Egypt and worships Aset, the queen mother, chapter 41 and 46. And to really have a good understanding of the Bible, you really have to understand African culture. Right? That's why a lot of those names are so confusing to us, right? In the Bible. But there's a book that came out quite some time ago, another guy I study under named Nana Bunchi Dankwa. He's a PhD. He wrote The Africans Who Wrote the Bible. That's a good start for those who really want to know. It's a very good work. But he's focusing solely on the Akans too. But other African groups, cultural groups, are starting to dig this up too and find the same thing. Now, here's King Shabaka, right? He's mentioned in the Bible, right? This is Egypt, Nubian. Look at his lips, look at his nose. Undeniable black person, right? Chronicles chapter 12, Kings chapter 9. Africa all up in the Bible. We just don't know it. We don't understand it. We haven't been taught. I'm in the Greco-Roman world. Now this is interesting. The Greeks identified Zeus as Amen. Alexander of Macedonia, Alexander the Great, accepted the title of son of Amen from conquering Egypt. He doesn't bring in any new gods. He comes in and has to take on the tradition of ancient Africa. There was a book written around 6 BC called the Alexander Romance, where Alexander the Great travels to Kush, Nubia, after he conquers Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt. But he's not able to conquer Kush, and he disguises himself in this novel. You can read the novel online. It's an ancient book. He disguises himself as a merchant to go to Kush to try to steal the temple of Amen, one of the deities, one of the shrines of Amen, and he gets busted. Right? And he has to go before the great queen who was ruling at that time and apologize because she said she was going to take his head off. Right? And he just said, we just want this, we want this shrine up with us. I have that title. She said, no, you can't get it. You can't get it. This is according to a novel. The encounter, I just talked about that with the Meroitic queen. All right, this is Zeus Amen. Amen in the New Testament. Got about 10 more minutes. Amen is an esteemed universal deity in the Greco-Roman world. All of the oldest New Testament texts were written on papyrus discovered in Egypt. Every last one of the New Testament papyrus or books was discovered in Africa. Every last one. Every last one. They didn't discover them in Israel. They discovered these in Africa. But this is old knowledge. Right? We can talk about that another time. The book of John 10:1 and 13:20. Thus said the Amen. We need to relook at this. Why is the book of John mentioning the Amen in a higher authority than Jesus? This gets pretty deep, y'all. And we talk about this in our book a little. Revelation 1:11. There's a whole story in there about Amen. And when we were doing the research, I told Dr. Farage, I said, well, let's do the research on this town that they're mentioning. What was this town? The whole town was named after Amen. All the deities in this port city were Amen deities during the period of biblical times. Revelations 3:14, the Amen. Here again, The Amen is used as a proper noun in the Bible. And authentically African deity. Now, the Amen Tristan in late antique Africa and West Africa. The Amen continues in Nubia during the 6th century among the Nubidae. Now, we talk a lot about ancient Kemet, but we don't know that culture, in many regards, is still alive and vibrant today. The Nubidae, that was the last Kemetic pharaoh during the 6th century AD. Dr. Farage's book, his latest book deals with that, the Nubidae. The new book, Africa World Press, that's his book, on the roots of Nubian Christianity uncovered, the triumph of the last pharaoh. That's through African World Press. The Akan, the God, the Yoruba, the Adama, and other West African ethnic groups emerged and migrated from the Sahel-Sudanic corridor, not necessarily from Kemet. We're not saying that no groups of people migrated from ancient Kemet and brought these cultures to West Africa. We're not saying that either. What we're saying that we have to look at the Sahel. More research and more attention has to be paid to the Sahel. Nubian Egyptian names in Amen tradition reemerge in the Akan culture again. Yi, Firi, Amen. Today, you can see this within Akan culture. Again, King Nana Amen Ndolfo, Akan monarch of Ivory Coast. This is according to the Los Angeles Times, 1995. He comes to LA. He's named after the Amen. This is an indigenous African king. Now, the black church scene is Amen. That's a spiritual, y'all. Y'all know that, right? Do y'all know what spirituals really mean, though? Spirituals, the black spirituals are really carryovers from Africa. There are a lot of African secret messages in there that we couldn't do because we were under a totalitarian dictatorship called slavery. So we couldn't say certain things. So we hid a lot of things in our songs. Right? Amen. That's a song to an ancient African deity. We call that in history cultural continuity. Right? This is something that our ancestors saved. This is an African song. It has nothing to do with our Christian heritage. This predates that. All right, now, we see here, this is the transatlantic slave trade. Now, if you go into the sanctuary of the church, Reverend Youngblood has that when you enter, you'll see it on the wall, the same map. Look at all of these groups that many of our ancestors came from. You see, because we have historical amnesia as to who we are, right? And it's not our fault, per se, because we don't control the educational system. But we do control these environments, right? And this is what produced the Dr. Ben and the Dr. Clark and many of our other great scholars, Dr. Jeffries. These atmospheres like this, and this is what's going to continue to produce other great scholars, like our brother right here who's doing the moderating, and Brother Assault. But look, all of these groups that are taken out of the 15 million who are actually taken out of West and Central Africa, they are coming from the Amen tradition. So Kwame Osei wrote another book called, I got 5 or 6 more minutes. Kwame Osei wrote another book called The Ancient Egyptians Are Here, right? And basically what he was saying that throughout Ghana and West Central Africa, you will find the same people who built the pyramids, and their culture is alive and well. I know this to be true from myself, that there is a temple, a rock temple. Me and Brother Issa, we talk about this in our book, Amen, because I visited this temple in the Brahmapur region. And the keeper of the shrine is a shrine for Amen Ra. And it's a rock. It's a simple rock with water around it. Still alive today. So if Kwame Osei is making the argument that the ancient Egyptians are alive in Ghana and West Africa, then we make the argument that the ancient Egyptians are right here. Right here. We're looking at it. You are the ancient Egyptians. Because we are the same people that were taken from these same traditions that emerged from the Sahel. Do y'all understand what we're saying? All right. I have some church in here, right? That's okay, Reverend? I'm a son of a preacher, I'm sorry. All right, so in summary, the origin of the word amen was written specifically for the black church. We didn't want to get to, because most of our people are in the church. And a lot of times the black nationalists try to down the church. This is our IBMs. These are our Chase banks. We don't have anything else but the church. So we have to begin to educate our people. That's our role as intellectuals, is to bring the knowledge back to the church. Where our people, it was the church that helped to free us first. It was the black church. We can't condemn that. We're all one people. So it's meant to show the cultural unity of African people. We have doctors' charities that we'll talk about in the future. And we have presented this all over the country over the last 10 years. This book first came out in 2006. I do have a limited amount that are coming, so if you want to get pre-order them today, they'll be here next week. You can do so. And they are $20. Thank you very much.
We've had a divine treatment today, and so we had started out with Dr. Issa with the linguistic connection, then we had the historical connection. And they both did a magnificent job. But I know you must have many, many questions. So if you have a question, just please raise your hand. We'll try to get the mic to you. If both of y'all will come out to the center. I like to say, as they're in my field, and I like to say they both did a dynamic job. I've been to Egypt 28 times for over 27 countries on the African continent, and most of the things that they're talking about is directly linked to that type of study. Even right now, my teacher, Sister Rikedi Amon, is visiting my students and picking them up at the airport right now, and she'll be at the International African Art Festival signing her book at my booth 36 in the Manchu section. And we'll be giving a tour to the Brooklyn Museum on the July 3rd. I'm sorry I left the flyers at home, but July 3rd, that's this Sunday, we're giving a tour. So what you just saw here in West Africa, Mama Jeffries, Dr. Jeffries will be doing the downstairs part, and then myself and Sister Rikedi will be doing the upstairs part of the Kemetic ring. In fact, Dr. Jeffries is here. Will you stand, please? Okay, so now I'd like to address questions. Just raise your hand and we'll try to get to my yes. Say it.
I was blessed in 1996 to go to Ghana with our beloved esteemed Dr. Youngblood. And while I was in Ghana, I was told that the people in Ghana, that originally some of them had come from ancient Kemet, but I was told that they came when ancient Kemet came under attack from Alexander. And I don't call him the Great, Alexander the Less, on the floor. Because, you know, it's linguistic racism. Make a long story short, is it true? Were the people, did they move before Alexander attacked, or did it happen after?
I would say that it was different waves of families, small units, over a long period of time. And we gotta remember that phrase that I used at the beginning of the lecture, punctuating equilibrium. Families migrate primarily for three reasons: money, war, and famine. And all throughout ancient Egyptian history, you have basically all of these motivations to kind of go in various different directions. And so I don't argue that it's a whole scale, just large population movement. For example, the first intermediate period may have been sparked off by a drought. And so when there is drought, people migrate. I didn't read it per se, but that's exactly what the oral tradition in the Congo that Fukuyama recorded from an earlier interview in 1914, that they still had it in their oral tradition, that we came from Kayinga, which is the Sahara, as a result of the droughts, the desertification. And so directly from Kayinga through the forest, they settled in what is now the Congo. And they still hold a lot of the traditions of that Sahara, the Sahel belt that he mentioned, earlier. So it's small population movements that you see.
Is it true that the words that are similar in Twi are similar in the Metaneta?
Yes, because they come from a common. I didn't get into it, but they all belong to a common language family. Now, when you look at the literature, as the current consensus is four families: Niger Congo, Nilo-Saharan, Khoisan, and Afro-Asiatic. I'm from the Diopian school, and we reject these models based on linguistic evidence, and we use what Obinga started, which he named, he called Negro-Egyptian. Now, the word Negro in French does not have the connotation that it has in English. It's just simply the word for black. So Black Egyptian language family, which encompasses a lot of these languages that belong in, that are currently in West Africa, Central Africa, and in Northeast Africa. And so, because they come from a common parent, you'll see basically dialectical variations of the same words in reference to the same phenomenon. And so, but in a lot of times, the same word may go through a change in pronunciation. It may not look or sound the same, look as far as when you write it down, but it may not sound the same, but it's in fact the same word. So for example, the word Yahweh, many people don't know what that word means. It's really the word Amen in the variation of Yahweh that is prevalent still in West Africa. They say the Yahweh, say it's an association with sun, lightning, thunder, things of this nature. I wrote an article about it, and I demonstrate, I go through the sound changes. It sounds different, but it's the same. It's a linguistic process, a scientific method that we do to be able to demonstrate that regular sound meaning correspondences throughout the process. But in short, yes.
Thank you.
Let me go there and we'll come over here. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a question since you're talking about translation.
Since you're talking about translation, you opened my eyes to trying to understand the translation you're getting, the misinformation you're getting about the Ankh and Ma'at. Could you just elaborate a little bit more? Because you're saying we're pronouncing it wrong, we have a wrong understanding of it?
I wouldn't say you're pronouncing it wrong. Because there's a different, remember ancient Egypt was a civilization politically for over 3,000 years. And, we can't understand English from 700 years ago, let alone whatever it sounded like 3,000, years ago. So when I'm doing my linguistic analysis, I'm usually going off of the Old Kingdom beginning with the Middle Kingdom, ancient Egyptians. And so you have the New Kingdom, and then you have Coptic. And so in the older traditions, I wish I had the visual, a particular sound, as far as we say in the Ankh, it was actually a K sound. So you say, it's basically like saying Congo or Congo. And so the reason why I look at the Bantu language because within Negro Egyptian, it is the language family that has preserved the older pronunciations better than any other language family. So when I want to learn how it probably sounded earlier, I go into Bantu. I go through the scientific linguistic process, and this is how we discover these pronunciations that are still being pronounced just in everyday life. And you get a better understanding. The reason why we do this is so we can get a better understanding of these phenomena in ancient Egypt, because the ancient Egyptians didn't create dictionaries for us. They didn't write books in a way that, explain what they understood as just everyday reality for them. They were just living their life. And so they wrote expecting that everyone would understand exactly what they wrote. And so they couldn't possibly envision that their civilization would not be what it was, then, to where they had to explain these phenomena. And so, because we don't have the ancient Egyptians directly in front of us, we have to go a different route. And so we go through the other languages, and then we do a more educated guess, more systematic guess, based upon the family, because ancient Egypt belongs in the family. And so, when you start looking at these brother, sister, cousin languages, they're still pronouncing the words the way. So you can say Inkwa, that's how the Akan pronounce Unk, and in Congo pronounce Unk. But in Kikongo, they still have the other prefix, but it's been palatalized, so they say Zimu. And so either one would be correct. It doesn't matter. It's just a dialect. So I'm from New Orleans too, so they'll say chill instead of here. It's the same word, regardless, how you pronounce it. So I wouldn't be so gun-ho on the pronunciation, just to understand so you can see and hear the other words in the other African languages, so it wouldn't be so foreign to you, when you come across this in these times.
Another question here? Come over.
Thank you. So my question is linguistical, and what's the relationship between Kemet and the other countries north of Kemet? When I look at the map of Africa, I don't stop at, it doesn't make sense to me to just stop at the sea. If you have a boat, to me, you would go across the sea. So I would think that the United Arab Emirates and Palestine would also be part of the Median Empire. So is there a linguistical relationship between them?
Okay, in this text, I go through that. And the reason why, because I'm tracing the English word love into its African roots. So I have made the scientific argument that there's a relationship between Indo-European languages and African languages. And that linguist that I showed earlier, Jean-Claude Mboli, in 1993, Theophilo Obenga wrote a book in which he promoted the Negro Egyptian language family. However, there's a certain level of steps that he did not do. He just gave the preliminary work to be built on. So 20 years later, here comes Jean-Claude Mboli, who does the necessary scientific work. But in that process, he discovered that, well, he reaffirmed that the Semitic languages does not come directly out of Africa, but there's still a relationship. There's a group of individuals who still live in the Levant, but a group of Negro Egyptian speakers come and settle into the Levant, and their languages converge on each other. And this is what develops Proto-Semitic. The same process develops Proto-Indo-European. And so a lot of words that you think are English words are in fact African words under the dialect pronunciation of the different language families in terms of Latin, the Germanic languages, and Greek and things of this nature. And so he goes through that process in his text. There's other works like by J.G.K. Camper-Dunn, and he argued, he's still going off of the traditional model. So he argues that the Indo-European languages come out of Niger-Congo. And so when he's looking at Indo-European, he's seeing all these African words in Indo-European, and he's explaining it. So there's a history there. And again, it has to do with migrations. Our ancestors settled, and then some just kept going. And we bring our culture and our language with us. And, you know, you teach it to your children, and their children pass it on to their children. And even if it's pronounced a little differently, it's still the same ideas, it's still the same words. And so you have these underlying substratums, even in languages where another language is dominant. And so one of the things I discuss in here is how, for example, when there's war and they capture the women, and you know they procreate with the women. Well, the women coming from other tribes and languages, they're still raising the children. So they're teaching the children the language in which they know. So of course they're forced to learn dominant language from their captors, but they're still speaking, you know, the languages and the terms from their literal mother language. And this is how these terms, you know, remain or borrowed into the language. So it's very complex.
I can deal with the question back there. And sister, also you have to understand that the early European empires, their rulers didn't speak. Like we didn't write and stuff like that. Most of them still had African scholars who were their educators, who taught them to write. So again, you're going to have a constant influence of these African words in there. And the whole world founded, all of the Germanic tribes, England, all the way through. Okay, all the way to modern times. Yes.
Can you come and speak in the mic?
Instead of arguing or debating all the time about technicalities and whatnot, just get clear and want to ever understanding of the word.
Okay, that was just a comment. You hear the story.
When you speak of the Phoenicians, maybe I can approach it this way. Ancient times, ethnically, what would be the boundaries of Africans, and when did that boundary change so that Europeans are now pretty much dominating North Africa? What would have been the ethnic boundaries of African people in ancient times, and when did that boundary change?
It's kind of hard to answer that question because the notion of an African boundary did not exist until 1884, you know, with the Berlin Conference. And so that, you know, there's a lot of scholars, including Diop, who consider what we can consider the Levant and Arabia as just simply Northeast Africa. And so, you know, again, as I demonstrated in the lecture, they've been doing trade and migrating back and forth since at minimum, the 4th millennium BCE. So, you know, there's always been this interchange. And so when it came to what groups became dominant in different particular times, again, they don't have a concept of borders like we have. It's a different mindset back then. So there's no states like that. There's no such thing as a continent. You know, there's no word for continent in any African languages. That is a new concept that was brought along. So there's no Africa, there's no Africans. They're not thinking in that mindset. That's a new reality of life.
With the question here.
Thank you.
I'm going to address maybe 2 more questions so that you can have time to come and order books, things of that nature.
Could you say something more about the fall of Egypt and the rise of slavery?
Real briefly, like all empires, internal fighting, over-expansion of resources helps to contribute in terms to their falls. And again, the ancient Egyptians ran, or they controlled the trade going into Central Africa. They were the middlemen. But once they fell, and the other nations discovered where they were getting their stuff from, they just bypassed Egypt. So now they're not the economic center, so there's no commerce coming through Egypt. So it just falls. It's the same thing that happened in Timbuktu, same thing that happened in Detroit. Once the cars and stuff left, the economy, because that was the center, you know. And so, and from there, you know, the other nations started getting hit to what the Africans had in terms of raw materials. And then later on with the Arab invasions, you start to get slavery. And so the Europeans come later and just get on an already going 1,000-year slave market. And so,
If I could just add to that, in 640, Egypt was sacked by the Islamic invasion into Africa. That is the big jumpstart of the enslavement of Africans, and Africans really dispersing themselves into Western and Southern Africa. Remember, so when the Europeans finally came along, Africans were already on the move for 400, 500, 600 years. And so in many cases, the new guy on the block is the one that got into slave ship. And those were people coming out of the Nile Valley. And so that's why Africans in America identify with this Kemetic energy almost more than anybody, because we are those people. I think that was brought out. Brother he brought it out beautifully, that we are those Africans that came from the Happy Valley. We feel it. Entertain the last question? Yes, right here.
Through many travels to Africa, I just want to know, is there any frustrations among the Africans about between the trade and the language in terms of selling out their raw materials and nobody wanting to transfer the technology into Africa so they can produce and find the products and sell them out?
I think what you're asking is, you said that, are there any frustrations among...
Conversations within the Africans during the travels, they're always selling out, and they always take the raw materials and down as being
Yeah, that's a very big issue. And this is an issue that, you know, we try to address here with the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, right? He had his first international convention right here in New York City in 1920. And that issue was to deal with the black and with this Black Star Line, right? And how to bring the black world back to trading with each other. And these are the issues that we have to do. We have the same issues, all right? These are very, very good questions, very serious issues. Yes, they are very frustrated about that. And quite honestly, and even Dr. Jeffries can speak to this, they're always asking us to help with trade. Dr. Jeffries and the group, they set up and built a hotel in Ghana to deal with this issue. But these are very serious issues. How do we bring, and this is a conference that Dr. Youngblood, we're talking about doing something in February or March surrounding Dr. Amos Wilson's book, Blueprint for Black Power on Commerce and Trade. How do we link our money to the monies with trade in Africa and in the Caribbean? These are very important and very valid questions and issues.
This will be a continual, all those questions can't be answered thoroughly in this short forum, so they're going to be continued. This is the last question of today, last statement. Mom Jeffries.
I just want to make a statement just to say how great the two speakers were and how informative they are. Continually giving homage to Reverend Dr. Johnny Youngblood for what he's doing. And quickly add that in studying Meta-Metra, it was decades when we were translating Haku's journey from the actual Meta-Metra, talking about his trip down from Kemet, Nubia, straight across the continent into Yam, and then down into the Ituri forest towards South Africa. So that what you're doing is wonderful, and others are doing little pieces here and there, and this is a wonderful Renaissance time where we're bringing all this together. Even Leonard and I in 2010 were in Senegal, and at that time I presented to hundreds of people that had come from all over the world. I presented a paper, and Théophile Obenga was the moderator of the panel, and people from France, etc. And I talked about that Sahara factor and that the origin of the Heru Beget, which is what we call the caduceus symbol, that medical symbol, are traced back to Africa and into the Sahara area where you have the solar disk. The solar wing disk was there under the name of Amun because the ram symbol is associated with Amen. And so that same ram symbol that the Hebrews will pick up and blow the shofar, right, was that symbol that was part of this symbol that was in the Sahara, the horns of the animal as they saw the rising sun that represented God supreme. So there's so much richness that we have that we are just coming into it, and it's just a wonderful thing for us.
Yeah, I want to add too in our book, in the origin of the word Amen, many of the so-called Ndinkra symbols, they don't necessarily emerge in Ghana. These are Sahel symbols. For instance, we talk about the Sankofa bird. That bird we found was found on pottery during an archaeological dig in the Sudan. Right? So this is why the Sahel is so important in understanding contemporary African culture. And we deal with that in our book.
In conclusion, before we have you come up, as
first we're going to have the singing of the Black National.
Okay. As Mama Jeffries just mentioned, in our Dunetra class, we translate Harkuf. Right. This is first dynastic. What we call the first classical age. So that's the first three dynasties. They already talked about, they were traveling that same route you showed back. So there was trade routes going back and forth, so it's proof the Medu lecture actually clarifies that as we begin to study. So people, we're going to have the singing of the national anthem. Please come up, sign the list for if you want to pre-order the book. Please make sure you go home with notebooks. I have some DVDs over on the side of many of my lectures and things dealing with the same topic.
Also, we have the last 3 lectures here that Reverend Brown has brought for purchase. He has a limited supply for the last 3 lectures. And next week, let's not forget Booker T. Coleman and Dr. Ephraim Dankwa will be, Dr. Ephraim Dankwa will be presenting via Skype out of upstate New York. He's the chair of Africana Studies at Binghamton University. Dr. Youngblood.
Good evening, everyone. I'm torn as to whether we should sing the Black National Anthem or let the church say amen. What we usually do is try to listen to whatever the prevailing theme is. So tonight, the prevailing theme was amen. Dr. Issa, is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Everybody say the church said,
Amen. All right.